Alright, welcome to another J Little video, paired alongside a blog post. And today's post is entitled, Welcome to the Age of Irrationality. Okay, so, this is going to be a little shorter than normal, but this is a thought that I had last weekend that I think is worth sharing. And it's some of you are going to hear this and be like, this is so obvious, but I don't know, man. I feel like this one's worth sharing. Anyway, sometime last weekend, I was confronted with a thought that hadn't occurred to me before. This thought might have been the missing piece of the puzzle that prevented me from being able to effectively grapple with the ongoing decay of the tech industry. And if you need some reassurance in that point, read anything else on the site. Read tech news. Look at AI slop everywhere. I mean, it's trash, right? Anyway, so what was the thought? It was simple. Like most great, realizations. It's not the moment of realization that's important, though. It's the journey that got you there. You have to be in the right spot for it before you can accept it, right? And then you look back, and it's obvious the entire time, and yet maybe not so much, right? In any event, the thought was simple. The presence of rationality in our industry is no longer guaranteed. So why is that important? Well, it's important because most of my opinion pieces, regardless of how you consume the content and where you get it, rely heavily on the premise that regardless of whatever insane, off-the-wall shit is happening right now, eventually the system will correct the issue because the system itself tends to move towards a more rational state over time. But what if that is no longer true? How does that change things? As an aside, this doesn't apply to only the tech industry. It applies really to all kinds of things. If you're in the United States, it absolutely applies politically. If you're anywhere on the planet Earth, which presumably you are, if you're watching this, if you are aliens from 10,000 years from now, yeah, we fucked it up. Some of us knew it, and that sucks. Shit happens, okay? But, If you are one of the people in the rest of the world, look at how we're fucking up the planet. I mean, look at the fucking heat waves everywhere. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that irrationality rules our lives. Because let's skip the tech industry for a moment. If you know that you're fucking up the planet and you know that, the sea levels will rise and that catastrophic things will occur that, impede our ability to power our livelihoods, to feed ourselves, right? To feed and clothe ourselves, right? Wouldn't you stop doing those things? Isn't that the only rational course of action one could take? So where's rationality? It doesn't exist. It's not here. It's gone. Whoo, bye-bye, on the breeze. So, it's funny. So that aside, why is that important? Well, we already did that part. Never mind. Anyway, this changes things. For me personally, it changes a lot. One of my biggest frustrations with the tech industry is how often we tend to act irrationally. I think I spelled that. So irrationality. Yeah, I gotta fix that. Anyway, even though the history and the data dictate that a different path would have made more logical sense, so much of the aggravation expressed here is based on the premise that this industry is supposed to be a rational actor. And thus, every time we callously disregard that notion, I can't help but to take it personally. And when I say aggravation expressed here, I mean in the context of this blog, this channel, whatever, right? Other blogs I may or may not have, right? I take it personally because this feels very counter to the purpose that we were supposed to be serving. In this way, the thought is actually comforting on some level, even though really this situation is not comforting. Finally understanding this is comforting, right? And the reason it's comforting is because if irrationality is now the expected Rationality. Yeah, no, that's the right one. Not irrationally. Yeah, I gotta fix that from the other one. Anyway, if irrationality is now the baseline assumption, and if we have entered a cycle in which irrationality can be expected to prosper rather than wither, then ultimately one can neither predict rationality nor expect it. Sorry for the inline editing here. Only one mistake so far, but a lot of confusing language. It's flipping me out a little bit. Anyway, this thought also scares the living hell out of me. Why? Because it betrays the possibility that even when the AI bubble pops, the insanity won't just peter out and crawl back under whatever primordial rock it emerged from beneath. And to be fair, I have had people in my life pointing that out to me as a possibility, but it wasn't something that I was ready to internalize, frankly. I have been so hooked for so long on the idea that ultimately, at the end of the day, little fits of stupidity aside, the tech industry will ultimately live up to its reputation as rational actor of last resort. Or just, right? And we're not living up. That's not even a deserved reputation. That's an illusion in my head, right? Because it's not real. Like, shit. As soon as this thought really hit me in the right place at the right time, it just all kind of fell into place, right? But, if rationality no longer has a reserved seat at the table, then there really is no telling how any of the players caught up in the forthcoming bubble burst are ultimately going to act when push comes to shove, at least not from a rational standpoint. So, what inspired me to have this thought? I honestly do not know. I don't know what straw broke the camel's back of denial and idiocy here, but it did happen. All I know is that when I look back over the course of my career through the lens of the shiny new idea, new to me, maybe not so much to you, it seems clear that any increase in rationality we experienced was likely a coincidence rather than an engineered outcome. This has probably been the case for at least the last decade. I mean, I don't think I would be hard-pressed to make a case for it going longer than that, frankly. That makes sense, of course, because I've been bitching about this industry on various blogs for at least a decade now, right? So why is this realization important? For me personally, it's because I was in denial. Irrationality has been the sea in which we have been swimming for a very long time as an industry. With each passing year, it has gotten worse and worse. But for a long time, I think that should be were. Sorry, I can't turn off the editing brain. If only I could do this before filming the video, right? But anyway, for a long time, there were enough rational actions being taken by seemingly rational actors to allow one to believe that this was not the case. For example, if you just turned a blind eye to the insanity of cryptocurrency and the stupidity of the blockchain, and both those things are immensely fucking stupid, you could maybe fool yourself into believing that pre-AI, everything was fine. It wasn't. No. There are many examples of this that span over the course of multiple decades. One of my favorite examples is how our supposedly rational industry took the another error there, simple principles outlined in the Agile Manifesto and turned them into the lumbering and horrific behemoth known as Scrum. I actually wrote a blog post about this very thing in 2018 called Agile's Good and Scrum is Dumb. Fun fact on that blog post actually lost me a job. I went into an interview and, God, it probably was right after I wrote this in 2018. And one of the guys in the interview who I had ironically interviewed with at a previous job, he was one of these guys who ran around and he ironically, or non-ironically rather, referred to himself as a 10x engineer, baby. A term that is fraught with disdain nowadays. Of course, I don't know. I guess Claude is the 10x engineer now, right? Depending on your view on that particular issue. But anyway, he had interviewed me before and rejected me before for an entirely different place. He did not remember me, but he is a very, very hard person to excise from your brain. He's also a bit of a fitness freak, obviously, beefcake right here. Oh, we got along on that front. No, we didn't. Um, anyway, he actually, to his credit, despite all the things I just said about him, shitting on him as a professional and maybe even as a human being to some extent, he took the time to look at my blog, which made for one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had in my professional life. Because he read this post, Agile is good and Scrum is dumb, and he fucking hated it. Right? But that's good, right? No, like, you don't have to agree with my opinion. I think it's great. So the interview we spent like 15 minutes going back and forth on this thing. And, I mean, as soon as that came up, I knew it was over. Like, as soon as I knew that it was the guy here, which I had heard beforehand when they told me the name, so I knew it was going to be him, but I didn't expect him to actually take the time to look at my blog. And so, it was a good back and forth at the time. He was a big believer in Scrum and Scrum stuff. Yeah, great. I mean, you could go that way if you'd like. It's a silly system made by silly people with management degrees that aren't worth spit. So, whatever. Agile's got it right, yeah. I mean, literally the first thing in the Agile Manifesto is, individuals and interactions over, processes, right? Scrum is a process, like literally from the get-go. Fail. Anyway, right? Anyway, so but I've been calling bullshit for years. So there's another post from 2022 in which I skewer cryptos, NFTs, and the metaverse, and that post was called "Scam Review Big Tech Bullshit." Of course, I came close to realizing that there was no rationality. Not no rationality, it just isn't. It shouldn't be the expected baseline. It just shouldn't be. There are still rational actors in this industry, and there are people. I'm not sure I would refer to myself as a rational actor so much, but I'm very emphatic and emotional, and I'm going to let you know what I'm thinking, but that doesn't make me rational so much. If I was more rational, I would have come to this conclusion much sooner. Anyway, back in back in 2023, I don't know what the month is, I wrote the post, "Developer Brethren, it's time to embrace boring." And I made the following statement. I'm going to quote from that blog post now. "Let me go even further here. I like it when my developer tools are boring. If they are boring, it means they are consistent and reliable. It means they aren't creating undue drama in my life or the lives of my end users. As an industry, we should all be striving towards building things that ultimately end up being boring. But of course, that engineer-like inclination flies in the face of all the scam-adjacent tech bro behavior that makes up the public face of our industry. You can't spend all of your time hyping up investors and rich assholes, so they'll give you stacks of cash by telling them that you are going to be building boring and reliable tools based on boring and reliable technologies that already exist. Not unless you are building something that is actually innovative, which most of us aren't." End quote. This bit of text actually gets to the root of the problem: money. You see, at some point, tech went from being an industry that produced useful tools to being an industry that could make people rich. And that is a shift that really matters. I remember it was decades ago, the first time, and I think I heard this when I was in my little shitty 2-year college, which, no shade there. Right? It did its job. It got me where I'm at. Right, and get my associate's degree in computer tech. And I remember the first time I encountered something, because for me, I've been fucking with computers since I was 6. So my father was in this, and I just did it. I had a programming book. Like, I just learned how to code at an early age, and that was very lucky. But in college, I ran into somebody for the very first time, in which I said, "Why are you doing this?" And not just one person, multiple people. "Oh, you can make money." Now, this is back in the late 90s before the dot-com bubble burst, right? And, I just found that so quizzical and odd at the time. But, it makes sense to some degree. Like, everyone here is playing the game. We're all rats running the race, whether we know it or not. Unless you got $1 billion with a B, or a T, as the case may be. Not anymore. Fuck you, Elon. But you're running the rat race, right? We all are. We might lie to ourselves, and we might have enough where we can pretend we're not, but we are. And those people were doing the same thing, and they're just trying to win the race. And who can blame them, right? But that was the first time I ever encountered somebody who got into this. And it wasn't for as you might say, the love of the game, right? And it just, when it changes that way, things shift, right? To get, in both cases, if you're producing a useful tool or making people rich, you need an idea. But if you're producing a useful tool, you have to see it through. You have to make it work. You have to care about the details, the logistics, the reality, the practical nature, the pragmatic elements of the whole thing. But if you're just looking to get rich, you don't have to care about any of that other shit. You just need an idea. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a particularly good idea. Just an idea. And then you have to sell other people on that idea. And you have to generate hype around that idea. Does any of this sound technical? Because it's not. It's not. It's fucking terrible. And then you create enough hype and you create enough woo about it, and somebody will buy you out at some point, and then you can retire in a wonderland that lies beyond the wildest dreams of avarice. At the end of the day, the prospect of extreme personal gain is what inspires most of us to turn a blind eye to what our industry has become. Regardless of how close I came to realizing this in the past, consciously realizing this even at this very late stage of the game is important. It's still worth it to go down this road. That's because denial is a hell of a drug. A large part of my denial was driven by the idea that our core mission is to transform the irrational and inefficient into the rational and efficient. So grappling with irrationality is not out of the norm. However, if the industry itself has become irrational, then theoretically serving that purpose has also become impossible. The trick of it, though, is that because our industry has slowly become irrational, most of us are incapable of seeing it. Like the proverbial frog in the pot that is slowly being boiled. Inside our engine of chaos, the vast majority of our day-to-day routine resembles business as usual. It's not like irrational actors are walking around generally self-aware of how irrational they happen to be. Well, at least not most of them. I think Elon might know, but, certainly these AI fuckers know, like Dario and Sam. Come on, surely they know, right? Come on, can you be that detached from your own soul, the nature of your very existence? Maybe, right? It's hard to know unless you walk a mile in their shoes, and I'm never gonna do that. In their eyes, though, the actions they are taking feel rational, likely because their emotions tell them as much. So given that, it stands to reason that most of us are consciously unaware of this. It also stands to reason that the implicit embrace of irrationality is being treated and executed as if itself was a rational action, which makes it all the more confusing. Regardless, rationality is no longer a guarantee in this industry. Hedge your bets accordingly. What does that mean precisely? I don't know. But if we are absolutely going to discuss this as a topic moving forward, count on it. As it stands now, I personally feel some sense of relief. Admitting myself that the industry is operating on an irrational baseline will likely reduce my frustration when confronted with our daily stream of irrational bullshit. And there is plenty of it nowadays. If the expectation is now irrational action, then its power to disappoint me will wane. That is something I'm very much looking forward to. Thank you so much for hanging out today. Gonna run the credits, and we'll see you all next time. Peace out.